Hey friends, welcome to Canadian Cutting Edge, and today we're taking a look at the knife that's in this little box. Yeah, you already saw it on the thumbnail. This is the Civivi MINI Elementum. Comes in either antique brass or antique copper handle, and a little 14C28N blade. I don't know if you're interested in little knives or not. I really like tiny knives. I haven't reviewed a tiny knife for a while yet. Tiny knives, I tend to call them knives that have blades under 2 inches, but they have to be small in other ways too. So not just like the Mini Penguin by QSP, which is a shorter knife, but it's a little, I don't know if I'd call that a tiny knife or not, but this one I'm going to call a tiny knife. So let's get started. All right, here's the box that it comes in. I don't normally do unboxings with these, but there you go. There's the code C18062Q-1. You've also got Q-2, and the Q-2 means that you get antiqued copper. I got the antiqued brass. Focus down here. There you go. Also in the case is a little split ring. Why is there a little split ring in there? Well, it's because some of us like to carry our knives on our keychains. Here's my main keychain, and I've got this Tucson that I've dyed. I like these little split carabiners. Not split, but these little carabiners that I put on my keychain. And I can take my flashlight off. I can take my driver set off. You know, it's also by Civivi. You know, all kinds of other little stuff. And it's even smaller than the main knife that I use. By the way, this is M390. It's a Wong design. What's the model number again? Forget the model number. Anyways, it's a classic slip joint knife. Maybe you want a little locking knife. You might want to consider this one. There's some pros. There's definitely some cons. And there's more pros than cons. I'll tell you that to start with. I've not taken this apart yet. At least I don't believe I did. And that's one of the cons right there. I got it that time. Over half the time, I don't quite get it to deploy all the way. And I've been using flippers for a long time. And this one needs very specific attention to get it to flip open all the way. I think it's because this lock bar arm's got too much spring tension pushing over. And I'll try to remedy that and deal with that. Now, if you take a look at this side, the brushed gray on the stainless steel handle and the brushed gray on the blade are basically the same thing. So I think it's some kind of gray titanium coating that they put on there, and then they sand it off partially, and it comes out with this brushed gray look. So the blade's got this pretty decent look to it. It's coating that's been partially brushed off. We've got a hollow grind drop point blade, decent point on it, belly. By the way, it looks just like the Elementum but shrunk down, and that's about it. That's not really a forward choil for a finger. You're not going to find a finger, your finger's not going to grip up there really well. It's really made to hold back here. It's pretty good. It's nice and thin behind the grind. The grind angles, not so good. We'll talk about all the specifics a little bit later on, but the traditional really tiny labeling, it says 14C28N right there on the blade. Other than that, nothing on the blade. You've got your C on the handle by the pivot pin, and that's it. We do have a T6 screw back here, right there. So the one body screw with an hourglass shaped pin in there is a T6. Really close tolerances. That's a really good fitting driver in there. And the T8 up here, again, really close tolerances, well constructed. It's a frame lock, like you saw this lock arm before. I mentioned it before. I believe it's a ceramic ball in that frame lock. We've got ceramic ball bearings in here in phosphor bronze cages, so that's pretty good. Everything's rounded on the handle everywhere. The stainless steel side here, everything's rounded. The brass, got nice soft edges on it. Same kind of treatment on there. They put a black coating on it and brushed some of it off. it says it's got a hand rubbed look. It does not look hand rubbed to me, really. You know, the edges are a bit polished, and you know, maybe they did that by hand, but you know, that really looks machine rubbed to me. And oh, come on. There we go. And other than the action not being great, and I don't think that all of them are going to be that way. I'm sure somebody in the comments is going to say, maybe a few people, that their action is awesome on theirs, and it should be. And it's not going to take much at all, I think, to make the action on this really, really good as well. What does look a little odd is it looks like it's just a post in a hole on this side, but then that wouldn't provide any, you know, grip to hold the two parts together. So I'm curious to see how that's made right there. And other than that, we've got a little inset recessed area here for, you know, your split ring, or if you want to put in some thin paracord. I've got some, what is it, 150 paracord? Is it 100 pound paracord? I don't know. I got some light paracord that you could tie off in there if you want to. And, you know, because you can get all kinds of different strengths of paracord, thicknesses of it. So I like that back there. Lockup, it looks like it's locking up exactly where I want a brand new knife to lock up, so that's good. There's a little bit of a cutaway on both sides to make it a little easier for you to get your thumb in there to disengage the lock. And, you know, then you can close the knife. Blade alignment, very good. We've got captured stop pin in there, so you don't see a stop pin out here anywhere for, you know, in front of the flipper or anything. And it works fairly well. How well does it cut? Well, it's very thin behind the edge. It's about 13 thousandths. I'll give it the exact measurements later on. Its grind angle's not so good, but it cuts okay. And for a lot of things that you want a tiny knife for, you don't need it to cut super awesome. But the grind angles on this side are a little bit wonky, and the grind angles on this side are a little bit wonky too. Let's take this thing apart, and we're going to see if we can remedy this little issue, and I'll show you how it's constructed. First, let's start with this pin, and that's kind of cool. So it's a pin, and not really, well, I guess it's a screw. If the threads are there, the threads go into that side, and so that's why, you know, it looks as clean as it does on that side. Pretty nice. And you just have that hourglass spacer, which you can't do without. You'd have to put some kind of spacer in there, or else it would just squeeze it all the way together. So that's kind of cool. And here's the bearings. We've got 7 ball bearings in there. I wish they could have spaced them out so there'd be more in there. It's not terrible, but I think it deserves to have more. There's your captured stop pin right there, and you know, the opening there. And of course, it has to have a hardened washer, aka a race, so that it doesn't dig into the brass on that side. Of course, this side doesn't need it because it's stainless steel already. But the main thing I wanted to show you was this. If we focus down here, see how far that lock bar is over? That's quite the distance. There's too much pressure on this. You can train that back a little bit, you know, by holding it really gingerly, pushing it back, and flexing it just a little bit past, you know, the midpoint. Just push it a little bit past there. Be really careful if you're going to try to do this, because you can overdo it. Now, I've done it already far enough that this surface, which is this surface now, is just lined up with the other side right there. And that's as far as I want to go with that. I've got other videos that explain this in much more detail, how to fix detent issues. I've got a 3-part video series. I'll link it right up here in the corner. So you can see videos about how to fix detent issues for liner locks and frame locks. It's the exact same techniques for both of those. And you can see that. Now this thing also might have a ball that sticks out a little too far, because when it does get in that hole, when the detent does get in that hole, it really doesn't want to come back out. And but I'm not going to change anything else. Only ever change one thing on a knife and then test it. Don't try to change 2 things and try to, you'll be chasing your tail around to try to figure out what's going on. Anyhow, that's how it's constructed. It's actually very simple. Let's put it together again. I'm going to lube it up too, of course, with my Gunny Glide. Between the adjustment to this lock bar arm's tension and using, what I think is the best lubrication for knives that's out there, it works better to deploy the knife, and it's less pressure to try to disengage the lock as well, while still keeping everything lined up really nicely and, working well. So, yeah, that's really good. Now let's take some time to do all the measurements. I'm going to do something different today. I'm going to do the price point along with these measurements. How much does this thing cost? $42.50 US. That's in most places. You save 10% when you go to White Mountain Knives to get this with coupon code CCE. So that's a good deal. That means it's $38.25 US, which right now with the exchange rate in Canadian, it's over $50 Canadian, about 52 Canadian. But in Canada, this is around 60 bucks, 60 to 63 to 70 bucks. It all depends on where you shop. Integrity Knives had these. Of course, you can save 10% there with coupon code CCE as well, but they're sold out. And theirs was $69.99 to start with, which with the discount code is $62.99, which is the same price you can get it at Blades Canada. Actually, they got one version. I think it's the brass is more and the copper is less. Other stores, when they do have a difference in price between the ones, they make the copper one cost more and the brass less. Yeah, I don't know exactly how they decide which one they're going to put at a higher price than the other. That's just what they do. House of Knives has got these at $63.99, so a little bit more at House of Knives. Amazon in United States is $42.50 as well. So I'll have links for all those stores I mentioned down there, as well as Knives and Tools for Europe. It's 43.56 euros to 52.95 euros, depending on which version you get. And I found a store in Australia for $78 Australian dollars, 78 Australian dollars for this knife. But that was only one store that I saw. So shop around and you might find yourself a good deal. And when you can use my coupon codes, go ahead and do those. I get nothing out of the deal. If you use my coupon codes, I get nothing. It just helps you out. So even if you don't like me, if you think I got an ugly mug, hey, still use my coupon codes. I know, you guys think I look awesome, don't I? Not too awesome, just for a guy. Okay, dimensions, sizes, all that stuff. Weight, 39 grams, 1.37 ounces. Pretty light. The sharpness from the factory, not that great, about 200 bests. Worse than average from the knives I test. Grand angles will tell you that in a minute. But yeah, let's do grand angles now. Switch things up a little bit. Grand angles, the per side average. I measure all along the entire blade. This side's got an average of 24.4 degrees. This side's got an average of 24.7 degrees. So that means at the tip, it's almost 50 degrees. So 50 degrees going through stuff, it doesn't work all that well. For something like this, I think I do a maximum of 18 degrees per side. I might even do less. This is not a heavy-duty use knife. It's a light-duty knife, and it can benefit from a very shallow angle. 14C28N, Rockwell around 59, a little bit more, a little bit less, depending on heat treatment and stuff. But this side, let's do the angles. 26.2 degrees here at the heel, and it changed all the way up to the tip to 22.6. 3.6 degrees of change. This side, 25.1 to 24.3, so less than a degree of change along that side. Measurement lengths, the cutting edge length is 43.2 millimeters, that's 1.7 inches, slight rounding. I always measure in millimeters and then I convert it to inches. The blade length, so tip to the closest spot on the handle, is 46.5 millimeters, 1.83 inches. The thickness of the blade, 2.16 millimeters, that's 85 thousandths of an inch thick, so quite a bit less than a tenth of an inch. The blade depth, it's biggest right near the heel of the blade, 14.2 millimeters, 0.559 of an inch. How thick is it behind the edge? Remember, this is a hollow grind, as I said earlier. 1/3 of a millimeter, which is 13,000ths of an inch thick. So nice and thin, just the way I like it. The length of the handle, 63.4 millimeters, 2.5 inches. The thickness of the handle, 8.25 millimeters, which is 0.325 of an inch. The handle depth this way, the widest point, 15.7 millimeters, 0.618 of an inch. And when the knife is closed, the widest point is with the flipper right here, almost exactly 19 millimeters, just under 3/4 of an inch, 0.748. And the total length of this knife is about 110 millimeters, 4.33 inches. Oh, by the way, the grip area, it's right around 50 millimeters, right around 2 inches for the grip area. So that's all of that stuff. My final thoughts. Yeah, it's a cool little knife. I'm glad that they've got at least 14C28N. Means that it's a usable steel, not just some super cheap garbage. I'm very happy with that. By the way, there is a little bit of a sharpness trail there, and that's done well. And it can slice and cut fairly well for little things. It just needs to have better sharpening. With those wonky grind angles being about 50 degrees, I know this is probably closer to 70 degrees, but just for example, it just is too of a blunt edge. I'd like a much more shallow edge on here, and then it'll cut a whole lot better. This is super common with small knives. They get sharpened at factories at too steep of an angle. And, people get these little knives and they go, they're useless. And I think a large part of that is because they haven't been sharpened well. So if you know how to sharpen knives, and hopefully you do, and if you want to learn more about sharpening, I got loads of videos on sharpening, get this thing to a decent angle, and you'll find out that it can cut quite well and is actually quite useful. Like I showed at the beginning, I keep a small knife on my keychain. If I've misplaced my pocket knife or lost it or something, chances are very low that I've lost my keys. Well, I misplaced them in the house. I don't tend to lose them when I'm out and about, but anyhow, it's a second knife. Maybe it's a third knife on your person, and that's a good thing. Knives are very useful tools. Yeah, that was a bad grip in my left hand. But it's not a great design for that either. There it goes again. There you go. I prefer these kind of knives locking with thumb studs because I can always deploy those really easily. With the flipper, it's not quite as easy to deploy, but they're trying to copy the Elementum design, and so they put a flipper on it. That's my least favorite thing about this knife is that flipper. Although it's a decent flipper with some jimping on it and stuff, flippers on really small knives just tend not to work out all that well. But you can put a little thumb stud on there, or they could have, and I'd be quite happy with it. Being a frame lock knife, it wouldn't be great with a thumb stud, with the frame lock. That just hardly ever works out for lefties. For righties, just fine, but for lefties, not so much. And there is enough real estate here to grip it up on the frame, and if you get it right. And if you get it right, you can deploy the blade well enough that way. It's a little bit too much like a toy with the flipper and not enough like a tool, in my opinion. But that's my opinion. What's your opinion? If you have one, let us know your experience below. And if you want to get one, tell us about that as well. Thank you to my supporters. You guys are awesome. I appreciate your monthly help every month, either on Patreon or YouTube memberships. You can click join below or patreon.com/CCE. And for just a couple bucks a month, you can support this channel and all that I do. And remember, friends, always cut towards your chum, not your thumb.